Welcome to the Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership Podcast. Subscribe now so you don't miss a drop of straight talk you can't get anywhere else. We discuss the whiskeys to drink, music to listen to, and what it really takes to be an effective leader. I'm your host, Galen Bingham, the leadership strategist. Tonight's guest, retired Chief of Police and current VP of Julie Parker Communications, Christopher Mannino. Hey, what you drinking? You know, this is reminding me of some research that I looked at that suggests that everyone communicates via micro expressions. And what I mean by micro expressions, I mean, we've all seen the research that says only 7% of all communications are the words that you use. The rest is body language. But there's a micro expression that everyone has that people only pick up on subconsciously, and it occurs in the eye region. And the best that we can tell is when people have to do something or say something that's inconsistent with what they believe to be true, there's a split second where they've got to figure out how to make this fit. And it happens quickly, and we don't really know what it is specifically, but we pick up on it subconsciously. The other person picks up on it subconsciously, and usually they will say something like, something just doesn't feel right? Because you can't really articulate what it is that you've sensed, but you sense that split second when they're trying to figure out how to make this right. I got enamored by this research because at the time there was a political election, and I'm going to tell you, I couldn't understand what the candidates were talking about. They were talking about elements of an issue that I had no idea what they were talking about. But I found myself watching their eyes. Because I was trying to sense, did they believe in what they were talking about? Because if they didn't believe what they were talking about, I knew at a very guttural level that I didn't need to listen to them because they don't believe what they're talking about. And I sense that we do that all the time, especially with people who are supposed to be in a position of authority. We're testing to see, do they believe what they're talking about, even if we can't understand what they're talking about. That seems like something that you would probably pull on a lot in your line of work, either technically, I mean, you may have studied that, but instinctually, you may have gotten the sense for when someone is trying to mislead you.
So I was fortunate enough to be able to attend the FBI National Academy. Now, the FBI National Academy is a leadership school for law enforcement leaders located within the FBI Academy. And one of the subjects I studied was something called statement analysis, which is related to what you're talking about. And statement analysis is essentially paying attention to the exact words that somebody is using to talk about a situation. Just an example would be, say you've got a 15-year-old kid and you suspect that he took your car out last night while you were sleeping. And you say, Johnny, did you take our car out last night? And Johnny says, Dad, I don't even have a driver's license. That sounds like he's saying he didn't. But what he's actually saying is, I don't even have a driver's license. It isn't actually a denial of taking the car out. But oftentimes parents will go, oh, okay, well, I don't know, something weird's going on. But when we pay attention to the exact words someone's using, we can often catch deception. And you see leaders do this, especially political leaders, all the time, because we are ingrained from the earliest ages not to lie. So we will respond to a question in a way that we can alleviate that self-imposed guilt by, well, I technically didn't say I didn't. What I said was, I don't have a driver's license. And that's another way where you can observe deception. And we see it all the time. I've seen it getting confessions from criminals. I've seen it in dealing with loved ones. Sometimes I wish I could turn it off because it's just a skill that's always there. And I don't want to know sometimes if people are lying. But just like that eye movement, those micro expressions, statement analysis, paying careful attention to what they're actually saying in response to your questions is a key to, is this person being honest or is there something else going on?
Wow, that's amazing. How does that help you in your current role? Because I can imagine how that would help you in your previous role, in your previous life, when life and death might weigh in the balance. Certainly, security, protection would weigh in the balance. How does that skill help you in what you do currently?
Yeah, I'll be honest, Galen. I try not to employ it just because the reality is that most people are lying multiple times throughout a day. White lies, inconsequential. But when you understand things like that, you pick it up. And again, I don't want it to impact friendships. I don't want it to impact relationships. So I'd say out of all my communication skills, that's the least applicable to what I'm doing right now. What I'm really focused on is helping leaders communicate both internally with the people they're leading and then with their community or their audience, their customers, whatever that may be.
Yeah, yeah. I've heard it said, and I can't remember who said it now, but I've heard it said that the biggest problem with communication is the supposition that it's already happened, right? What are some of the key things that you find that you spend time trying to convey to your clients about communication?
Well, we discussed the honesty and sharing what you know now, and I think that's really that is a foundation. Another one is focusing on your internal audience. Oftentimes, we'll get called because a leader's having a problem with the external audience, communicating with the community or the public or their customers. And when we analyze the big picture, they also have a problem with their internal audience. They're not communicating well down the chain. And what we always say is you got to fix the internal first. You can't worry about communicating outside your organization if you're not even communicating well within. Now, let's get back to jazz. If everyone's trying to play at their own rhythm, at their own tempo, that's not going to work. You have to have certain parameters. You have to make sure that we're in the same key. Well, internal communication keeps everybody in the same key. It keeps everyone in the same tempo. So you have to focus on that first. And I can't tell you how many organizations announce big news to the public, and the first time their employees hear about it is when it's out in the public. That should never happen. It should be an internal message. Hey, here's what's coming down the pipe. This is big news. It's going to impact all of you. I want you to hear it from me first. And then we go tell that external audience. So that is a big factor oftentimes we have to try to convince leaders of, or maybe not even convince, because I think leaders intuitively know it, but remind them of the importance of it.
Wow. Speaking of communication, I'm thinking about how jazz musicians communicate with one another in the midst of a set, right? While they're playing, they will communicate with one another. Famously, my favorite musician of all time, jazz musician of all time, is Miles Davis. And he would have certain licks that he would play, and folks would know what that means, right? And that he would famously turn his back to the audience. And what he said in a couple of interviews is that he wasn't turning his back to his audience. He was turning his horn to his band to communicate with them. And, and you're talking about the importance of internal communication. What are some things that leaders can do to shore up their internal communication? Because that really speaks to trust, right? Can I trust you? In my book, I talk about how employees want to know if their careers, if their futures, if their dreams will be safe with a leader who's in charge. Very often, our employees want to know whether or not they're going to be safe with you as the leader. What are some things that you might encourage your clients to do to build that internal trust through communication?
Yeah, well, first I'd say break down the silos, break down the communication silos. Again, let's get back to this philosophy of need to know. I'm only going to give you information if I feel you need to know it. Let's be open with information unless we have a reason to withhold it. There are certain personnel issues, privacy matters, maybe trade secrets, things that we obviously can't just have out there in the open. But unless there's an articulable reason not to be sharing information, let's not keep it within silos. Let's make sure everyone has access to it. Even if you think, why does that department need to know? Sometimes things are related and connected in ways we can't possibly imagine. And sometimes we might think, oh, that person's so far down the food chain, it doesn't matter to them. And yet that piece of information might be critical in them helping a customer or helping a resident in a community. So break down those silos and then just talk to people. Talk to people like you would to a friend, like a neighbor over the fence sharing a glass of whiskey. That kind of conversational, I just want to share information from you. As a chief of police, I used to put out a weekly email, the Chief's Week, and I would just share what was going on. Here's the meetings I have. Here's the issues I'm dealing with. Did anyone care? I don't know. I don't know if they read it, but I wanted them to have access to it. I wanted them to have access to me. I want them to know what a chief of police did and what I was dealing with. And hopefully it was helpful to somebody, but if nothing else, it demonstrated I'm not hiding anything. I'm going to give you everything I possibly can. So those are the two big things. Break down the silos and just be conversational. It doesn't have to be corporate speak. It doesn't have to be this, jargon-filled technical. You said that, people want to feel they can trust leaders with their dreams and really with their lives. Then have that conversation with them. Tell them that they matter to you. How many leaders, this is what I would challenge your audience. How many of you have said to your team, I really value you. I really value your work, your input. And are you doing that? You talked about that third part of leadership of inspiring. Are you doing it on a regular basis? Are you trying to find people doing good as often as you're trying to find them doing something wrong? To me, discipline isn't whacking someone when they've done wrong. It's a gentle nudge of the steering wheel just to keep you right between the lines. You don't want to wait till you're in the cornfield, past the rumble strips and overcorrect, just gentle little nudges. And so the ideal leadership is communication. Hey, you know what? This could have been handled a little bit better. As soon as you see it, rather than ignore the problem, wait till it's something big down the road. And likewise, you see someone doing good, exactly what you want them to do. Hey, a pat in the back. Great job. I saw what you did there. That's exactly what we want to see in this organization. Those little things are really the big things.
I love it. I love it because it really does feed into my belief that everyone shows up wanting to do a good job at work. Everyone shows up wanting to do a good job. And that's why that first priority is paint a very clear picture of what a good job looks like. Because if you don't paint a very clear picture, they're going to meander around doing what they think is good, hoping that it's what you've been looking for. But to your point, the more you can communicate what a good job looks like, and then when they get it right, say, yeah, that's exactly what I was hoping for, the better they're going to be able to fit inside of this vision that you might have. I just love the diversity of tools that you're using to be successful, not only in the work that you've had in your previous career, but how you've leveraged that for this current career. And that diversity is kind of reflected in your taste in music. I'm going to tell you, I have not met many people who can demonstrate a passion, if not just an interest in jazz music, but then Afro-Latin jazz, especially Afro-Cuban.
Yeah, I love Afro-Cuban jazz.
Thelonious Monk, John Coltrane, but then Nat King Cole, and then Billie Holiday, but then say I also like folk, acoustic, Gaelic, reggaeton, Sinatra. Oh my gosh. So dude, you just like music.
I do. So for me, music's a time machine. And so, for example, Afro-Cuban music. I've never been to Cuba, but I have this vision when I'm listening, and I'll just be sitting at my desk doing my work. And for me, it's seasonal, like summertime, Afro-Cuban music's playing. I can just picture sitting in some bar in Havana, pre-Castro days. You've got some mobsters over there. You got some movie stars over there, some actors over here. I don't know. It just sets a mood in my mind. And each of those, Sinatra, Bocelli, Gaelic music. I love Scottish music. I don't know. Each of them transports me to a place. And so for me, it's just music's this time machine. It takes me to a mood and a place. And why be boxed into one genre?
I love it. I love it. And then this idea of an invisible board of directors. For those who know me, know that I have developed this real fondness for the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And one of the things that he talks about in that book that was written in 1937 is this idea of invisible advisors. And from a corporate standpoint, I call it my invisible board of directors. And so on your invisible board, you say that you would list Lincoln, FDR, and Eleanor Roosevelt, Kennedy, Reagan, Obama, and MLK. Pretty towering figures in the space of leadership. Why would you list those towering figures and then say, oh, yeah, my dad's got to be on that board as well?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're going to give me the freedom to choose anybody, I'm going to choose people who have led through some critical moments in the most serious situations. And you look at Lincoln with the Civil War, FDR with World War II, and Eleanor Roosevelt was a leader in her own right, both during her husband's presidency and after. And of course, Kennedy, Reagan, Obama, and MLK, they are towering figures. So if I get the freedom to choose anybody, I'm going to choose people who have been through it and who have shown character going through it. And then my dad, because I want someone who's there for my best interest, someone who I trust implicitly and who I know is just going to look out for Christopher Mannino. So in my mind, he's a towering figure too. He served in Vietnam. He was a police officer for 20 years, retired as a chief of police. So may not have been a president of the United States, but in my mind, a giant as well.
Let's talk a little bit about dads, because I'm going to tell you, my dad, and the joke is, my dad didn't make any sense when I was 7 through 14, and I was amazed at how much he learned in the next 7 years, because by the time I hit 21, this dude was amazing, right? And so there were things that my dad said when I was younger that I was convinced did not make any sense until I did some living. And then all of a sudden, I remember those words, and I could put them into context of why they were so significant. Can you think of any times when you can go back and say, "Wow, Dad made a whole lot more sense the older I got"?
Yeah. So with my dad, it wasn't his words; it was his example. My dad worked so hard. Cops didn't make a lot of money back in the '80s when I was a kid. We were a single income family for quite a while. So we didn't have a lot. My dad picked up a lot of overtime, and I never understood why he was working so often. And of course, being in law enforcement, a lot of it was overnight. So he'd work all night and sleep during the day. And I didn't get that until I was a dad myself. And I understood that overwhelming sense of responsibility to provide for your family. And it made sense. It made sense why so often, he would sometimes be at my baseball games in his squad car, working, show up by the ball field, stay as long as he could. He did everything he could to be there, but then also fulfill his responsibilities of being that breadwinner. That example made a lot more sense when I've got 5 kids now. And so I get it. I get why he works so hard. And I'm doing the same thing.
Wow. It's again, I'm growing more and more impressed with my dad, the more I try to live through this fatherhood thing myself, because I get it now. I get it now. Well, man, I have enjoyed this conversation so far, but man, I'm telling you right now, I'm gonna have to arrest you and bring you into the VIP room, because my VIPs are gonna be chomping at the bit to get some more insights from you, because communication really is at the core of what you have to do in order to show up as a leader. There was this notion at one point where the leader is the person who scores all the points. The leader is the person who runs to the front of the line and takes all the bullets. And that was the definition of leadership. Now, not so much the same way. The leader is really required to sit at 10,000 feet and watch the entire operation, because if the leader isn't sitting at 10,000 feet and watching the entire organization, then who is? Someone's got to be a steward of the entire mission. And very often that's the job of the leader. That doesn't mean that the leader doesn't pick up a shovel and dig a couple holes, because that's what needs to be done. But really it's their job to sit above and kind of be a steward of the entire mission. Or at least that's my thoughts. What are some final philosophies or thoughts that you would want to leave my listeners as they think about leadership?
To that point, I would give you a metaphor from law enforcement. Oftentimes, we're dealing with very active, very dynamic situations. And the tendency is to want to rush in, especially if you're a leader. But what you should be doing is the exact opposite, exactly what you said, establishing a command post, setting up communications, coordinating resources that are coming in. And that's very hard to do when you've been an operator your entire career. Now suddenly you've got stripes on your sleeve or bars on your collar, and now you're the boss. You have to learn to slow yourself down and stay outside of that crime scene tape and manage that situation. The other thing that I guess I would leave, getting back to communication, is you can't just be an effective communicator to be a good leader. It has to be authentic. And so, what you can't do is get into a hard situation. And I'll go back to the police analogy because that's my background. You can't have been treating people poorly in the community and suddenly you have a controversial incident and now you start talking about transparency, community relations, and all these buzzwords. It has to be authentic. And so if your culture has not been that, what you have to do then is not pretend it was, but simply promise to be that moving forward and then put those steps in place. But too often people want to just use the buzzwords, say what they're supposed to say. If it's not authentic, people know. You don't have to be trained in statement analysis or micro expressions, as you said, to have that gut feeling of, something's not right here. People get it. So effective communication, yes, but backed by authenticity.
I love it. I love it, man. And I really would love to get more into this temptation that leaders have to want to jump back into the fray. A lot of times it's ego, right? I want to show these young folks that I still got it. I want to show them how it's done. And yeah, it makes you feel good in the moment, but you're setting your entire organization back. And you're probably creating more harm than good when you rush in. So I would love to get your thoughts and your take on that. And how do you encourage leaders to pull back, like you said, to do the things that only they can do, so the entire organization would be set up for success. But I don't know that I feel comfortable saying that, having that part of the conversation on the free side of this podcast. Let's pull that into the VIP room. If I can capture you for some more time,
I'd be happy to.
Well, hey man. Well, again, I want to raise my glass. I was supposed to give another check-in on this Double Oak Peerless bourbon, but man, I've just been enjoying the conversation and this sip way too much. I'm just gonna say, yeah, this is gonna be a common spot in my rotation. So raise your Italian whiskey. Man, you barely got any left, man. I didn't give you a whole lot of time, but you've gone through that glass.
We can we can talk and chew gum at the same time. We can do both.
Hey man, thank you so much for what you're doing. Thank you so much for what you've done and for the importance that you're highlighting around this call for leaders to serve a higher calling. There is nothing more important than training the people to be more effective, especially when they're responsible for a lot of times training their entire organization. So with that, man, I'm going to raise my glass and say cheers.
Cheers, Sláinte.
Hey, it's not too late. Hit that subscribe button so you're sure to catch the next episode. If you're really enjoying the vibe, leave us a review or become a VIP for guest and show exclusives. Cheers.